on Zoom, but I don't see her face yet.
Okay. Yes. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, June 23rd, Washington County Board of Commissioners meeting.
The Board of County Commissioners of Washington County, also serving as the governing body of clean water services and all other county service districts, is now meeting in regular session June 23rd, 2020. Commissioner Willie.
Here.
Commissioner Rogers.
Here.
Commissioner Treese. Vice Chair Scouten.
Here.
Chair Harrington.
Here. Great, thank you. So the first item on our agenda is oral communications. And before we switch over to Kathy for that, I just want to highlight the summary of the constituent report that all commissioners have. We've received over 70 emails this past week. And many of the inquiries continue to be related to items from the last week or so, defunding police, racial injustices, as well as COVID-19. So please rest assured that your commissioners have received your emails. We've got great support staff here that helps ensure that we see those on a timely basis and that you get the best available information in your response.
Okay, we have 4 people signed up for oral testimony at the beginning. The first one being Jiraj Singh. I went ahead and unmuted you. If you're available, you can speak.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Jiraj, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can't hear you yet.
Well, now can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. So for the record, my name is Jiraj Singh. I'm going to lift up some names of Black lives that have been taken by local police. Aaron M. Campbell, Andre C. Gladden, Christopher Kalanji, Deontay Keller, James Jahar Akbar Perez, Jason Washington, Keaton Otis, Kendra James, Lloyd Tony Stevenson, Patrick Kimmons, Quanice Hayes, Terrell Kyreem Johnson. And there are so many more that Washington County does not record. None of these murders have had an impact on your budget process. The budget that you all have passed does not reflect the magnitude of change demanded in this moment, where a global uprising is happening for Black lives. In fact, the budget that was adopted is the epitome of institutional racism and is perpetuating white supremacy by cutting spending across the board by 5% while increasing police and prosecution spending by $7.2 million. Frederick Douglass stated that power concedes nothing without demand. It never did and it never will. At this point, we want to let you know that we are organizing to make sure you don't maintain power. And we will make sure the monuments and roads named after you and your colonizing ancestors are eventually, to put it politely, deconstructed and dismantled. At this time, there are no gray areas when it comes to standing up for racial justice and against the structures of white supremacy. In this moment, you are either for racial justice or against it. Defund the police, invest in Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to help clarify something. I've heard this statement that we cut the budget by 5%, and that's not correct. I just double checked with our county administrative officer. When our CAO went through the process with the departments on their budget requests for this fiscal year, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I want to make sure I get this correct on the record, that departments made additional asks compared to the prior budget year, and he asked them to accept a 5% cut on their new asks, not on what their asks were from their, essentially their base budget. Did I get that accurate? Okay, all right.
Okay, moving on. We've got one other. Fiona Smith had signed up, and Fiona, I have unmuted you, so you are free to speak.
Hello, my name is Fiona Smith. I'm a 20-year-old college student and resident of Washington County. As I've grown up in this county, I have noticed the inequities and discrimination of people of color and Black people in this county with housing, finances, education, and traumatic interactions with the police. I'm highly disappointed that such a large allocation of funds are put towards public safety when they should be going towards other areas that I believe actually contribute to public safety and the uplifting of our community. Policing is at best an emergency room solution approach to solving issues in our county. It does not actually address the inequities the Black community and communities of color are facing and puts them in further danger. Instead, we should be investing in upstream preventative solutions such as affordable housing, education, mental health services, and redistributing funds to marginalized communities. For example, just a few weeks ago, Washington County Sheriff officers shot and killed a man that was suspected of committing domestic violence against his partner. If we invested more money into services that support victims of abuse to get out of their situation, a loss of life may not have been necessary. I ask that you divest a significant portion of Sheriff Department's budget for the 2021 fiscal year to other areas with the direction of community leaders of color to put our tax dollars to better use. Reform and adding funds to the police force does not reduce violence and profiling done by the police. Even in our own county, a sheriff deputy attacked an inmate in jail and is still working as an officer. This is only an indication of a greater issue within our police forces of holding too much power with no accountability. Words and statements can be encouraging but hollow. Where we put our money truly shows what we care about. This real allocation of funds will only be the start to delivering justice for marginalized communities in our county. I want to emphasize that you listen to the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in this community as they know best what they need. Back up those needs with our tax dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Okay, next up is David Yeager. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I went ahead and unmuted you, and you're free to speak.
David, can you hear us? David, are you there? Mr. Yeager?
Mr. Yeager is here, if you can hear me
Wonderful.
okay.
Yes, we can hear you now. Please proceed.
Am I coming through?
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, my name is David Yeager, and I'm a homeowner in the Murray Hill area of Beaverton. I've been a resident since 1989, and I consider myself an active member in the Beaverton, Tigard, and Tualatin communities. I'd like to testify on two topics. One, I'd like to voice my support for decoupling from Multnomah County and the Tri-County area as it relates to coronavirus phase 2 applications. I'd like to see Washington County focus on, I believe, the 3 of 6 areas that we need to address in terms of criteria to qualify for phase 2. Number 2, I would like to request that we learn if other counties that qualified for phase 2 were giving any sort of waivers on the 6 criteria, especially case counts. Can Washington County consider asking for these waivers as we evaluate moving into phase 2 expeditiously? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Madam Chair, should we move on?
Yes.
Okay. Next up is Dr. Jim Lubischer. I believe you also have his written testimony there in front of you. I'll go ahead and unmute him. You are free to speak.
Dr. Lubischer, can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please
Okay.
proceed.
I'm unmuted. Chair Harrington and commissioners, thank you for hearing my testimony tonight. I did submit a letter of testimony and also another letter that I sent to the EPA Administrator, Gina McCarthy, in 2015 with regards to the proposed rule regarding the ambient air quality standard for lead. And tonight, I ask that the commission consider issuing a statement that represents the commission's position on the use of leaded fuel by flight training companies based at the Hillsborough Airport. In 2015, the EPA did not end up lowering that standard. And the basic reason was they concluded that because the current standard would be expected to achieve the public health policy in all but a small percentile of the population, then there's no reason to lower the standard. Now, I want to be clear and emphasize that the small percentile of the population, if you looked at numbers, that small percentile of the population is located children living in proximity to lead emitting industries such as lead smelters and airports, including Hillsborough, that use leaded fuel. Now, that conclusion by the EPA not to lower the standard felt that the loss of IQ points of 1 to 2 points in a small percentile of the population was okay. But I think that was inappropriate and unfair to those children that live near such lead emitting facilities. Just recently, well, in 2017, a very involved study was done titled "The Effect of Leaded Aviation Gasoline on Blood Lead in Children."
Mr. Libisher, your time is up. We do have both of your letters.
Okay, now did I get 5 minutes?
No, you got 2 minutes.
Okay. And I signed up for the 5 minutes afterwards, but okay. So yes, thank you for looking at the letters, and thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And Madam Chair, there's no others signed up for the beginning, but we do have Commissioner Treese back online.
Yes. Good evening, Commissioner Treese. All right. Next up would be the consent agenda, and I first want to announce some changes to the consent agenda from when it was initially posted. We have 22 items on tonight's consent agenda. There are 7 items under Clean Water Services. There are 2 items under Land Use and Transportation. There are 3 items under Health and Human Services. There's 1 item under Office of Community Development, 1 item under the Sheriff's Office. Support Services is where we have some changes. We have 2 added items, bringing us to a total of 8 items from Support Services. Item T, as in Tom, was added to award a contract for conference room tables. And, we have 3 added items. Item U, authorized contract with MISO and agreements with cities within Washington County for economic stabilization. And item V, as in Victor, to authorize settlement agreement. Those are all the items on tonight's consent agenda.
Move for approval of the modified agenda, Madam Chair.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt tonight's consent agenda. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you, colleagues. Next up on our agenda is a presentation on COVID-19. I'd like to welcome Marnie Kyle, our Director of Health and Human Services, up to the testimony table. And I believe you have a presentation this evening.
Yes. Okay, good evening, Madam Chair and board members and the audience. I do have just a short presentation as a way of providing the update. So go to the next slide, please. So as usual, we'll start with the phase 2 reopening criteria. So this is the criteria that we are watching so that we know whether we're ready to apply for phase 2. And so you can see a lot of red on this slide. The one area that we're doing really well is the 24-hour contact tracing. That's been completed within the 24 hours 100% of the time. The other area that's been positive for us that we're doing well and we're meeting the criteria is average hospitalizations per day. We're not seeing an uptick in that. We need to see a downward trend. That one's really tight because the number has been between 0 and 2 for quite a while. So sometimes a negative or an uptick trend means one hospitalization. So we continue to watch that and work with the state on that. As a reminder, the state doesn't use any of these criteria independently. So if we were meeting all the criteria, for example, except maybe we had one new hospitalization, that's unlikely to keep us from moving forward, depending on the coupling with Multnomah and Clackamas County. So the areas that we're not doing so well is the percent. We've talked a lot about we're doing more tests, and so the really accurate number is the percent of positive tests, and we are seeing an increase in the percent of positive tests. We are also seeing a 28% increase in the number of cases, and the state criteria or goal is to be 5% or less. So that's quite an uptick that we've seen. We have had since reopening 3 days where we've had the largest single day of new cases, and today was one of those with 39 new cases. And then also the really important measure that we're not meeting is the percent of cases that are not linked to existing cases. And the goal is to be under 30%, and you can see that we're at 65%. So 65% of our cases are not linked to other known cases, which tells us that there is community-wide spread. So the next slide, please. So that was the criteria. This is just the pure numbers. So you can see I already mentioned 39 new cases since the last report. Washington County is now up to 1,110 cases and 13 presumptive cases. And you'll recall that presumptive case is defined as somebody who has been exposed to a lab-confirmed case who also has symptoms and either has a negative test or hasn't been tested, and we treat those just like cases now. 154 hospitalizations, and fortunately no new deaths, but we have had 20 deaths, and 1 pediatric multisystem inflammatory syndrome, which is a very serious syndrome in pediatric populations. The other thing that we look at is long-term care outbreaks, and we have 4 open outbreaks. In long-term care, an outbreak is defined as 2 or more cases, positive cases. And just as a reminder, we don't count the outbreak as over until we've gone through 2 incubation periods with no new cases. So these can be on the list for a long time. And then we have 2 non-long-term care outbreaks and 5 business outbreaks with 5 or more cases. And, oh, go ahead.
On the business outbreaks, do we have to track those for 2 incubation periods like?
All outbreaks we track. We don't count them as over until we've gone through 2 incubation periods with no new cases. And the reason we track the business cases with 5 or more cases is just to give ourselves situational awareness because OHA reports those publicly. So we did expect to see rising cases. And as I mentioned, we've hit an all-time high in the past 2 weeks since we've been into phase 1. We are still seeing low hospitalizations, so that's a good indicator. And what that tells us is that maybe the most vulnerable folks who are older and folks who have other underlying medical conditions hopefully are doing more to protect themselves. So we need to keep working on that piece of it. And again, it's related to, yes, more testing. It's also because we're doing more contact tracing, and so we're finding people who have been exposed and who have symptoms and getting them tested. We're also seeing more workplace outbreaks, so we're seeing more, as more people go back to work, we're seeing more people in work sites that are developing symptoms and become positive. And then the other thing that we're seeing is more multi-household family gatherings. So I think we've all missed our friends and family, and we're letting our guard down a bit and having, you know, dads and grads parties, or visiting friends that we haven't seen a long time, or meeting them at the restaurant. And so just because you can have small gatherings, we really need to remember to keep our guard up and use our face coverings, and really to not mingle with other households if we don't really need to. So next slide. So here's a little picture of why we're doing well with the contact tracing, the surge capacity. So we have a total of 107 staff who are working on these outbreaks and working to find the new cases. So you'll remember it starts with receiving the lab report, doing the case investigation, doing the contact tracing, and then supporting people when they do have to go into isolation and quarantine, which could last 2 weeks or even longer. We're really pleased that we have really done a great job with OPHI in attracting and hiring some really great contact tracers with bilingual, bicultural skills. 30% of this workforce is bilingual, bicultural. And you can see the various languages up there. Okay, next slide. So regional readiness, it was mentioned that we are linked now to Multnomah and Clackamas County. So last Thursday, the governor announced that they were allowing Multnomah County to move into phase 1, but they were also linking Clackamas and Multnomah County with Washington County. So all 3 of our counties are linked together. So OHA has said that the region would not be expected to meet the additional, because there was some language around additional equity metrics that Multnomah County has adopted. And OHA said that we would not be expected to meet those. However, there is ongoing discussion about equity metrics that we may be asked to meet at some time in the future. And just for some reassurance, Washington County is ready. We've been collecting all of our demographic data using the Real ID demographic questions, which gives us a lot of detailed information about specific community groups so that we can really understand when there's disproportionate impact to any of our communities of color or other underserved, vulnerable populations. And we're continuously looking at those trends, and it really helps us to plan our mitigation strategies. So just as an example of how we've been using this data, we had noticed a slight uptick in Asian Pacific Islander, Hawaiian populations, and so we're doing our first pop-up testing for that, specifically outreaching to that community to let them know about this pop-up testing that's happening this weekend within the Asian Pacific Islander community. We also continue to facilitate weekly meetings with community groups that are really working to address concerns with migrant and seasonal farm workers, because we do continue to see an increased disproportionate impact on the Latinx population. So as part of the regional readiness, I also have, this was as of yesterday. If you look at the criteria that I just went through earlier for us, Multnomah County was meeting 2 of the 6 criteria. Clackamas County was meeting 4 of the 6, and Washington County is really, as of today, the update I gave you was only meeting 2 of the 6. So we have a ways to go. Okay, next slide, please. So the other thing that the governor announced is face covering requirements for the Metro County. And the face covering is required for all of us when we're at indoor places of business, indoor at places of businesses. And that is for both employees and customers. There are some slight sector-specific nuances to this, and our staff and our business assistance group can help folks to understand some of the different nuances of that. But for the most place, for most of us in the general public, if you go indoors in a public setting, you would be asked and required to use a face covering. Face coverings are not required, obviously, when you're eating or drinking. So if you do go into a restaurant when your meal is served or when you're eating and drinking, you wouldn't need to use it. When people are in their offices or cubicles and they're able to maintain physical distancing, and also if people have a physical or mental disability that limits their ability to wear the face covering, or medical conditions that make it difficult to breathe when you're wearing the face covering. Specifically for kids, they're not required between the ages of 0 and 12. However, the governor and our public health staff do encourage parents to help children between 2 and 12 to use the face covering if they're able. Okay, and then I'm just going to cover a little bit. Next slide, please. Our public health response, so what's happening on the ground? You've heard a lot about isolation and quarantine, and just as an update, we have over 500 people who are receiving daily monitoring that are either in isolation or quarantine. That means we have at least once a day contact with them to evaluate symptoms and what are their needs and what supports do they need to maintain compliance with isolation and quarantine. And of those, we have many families who are receiving extra support around food, housing, or utility, phone bills, those kind of things, so that they can maintain that. We have, we're continuing to provide business guidance and support. Since the governor's announcement, just within a couple of days, we had over 55 phone calls from businesses specifically asking about the face covering requirement. And so we've been helping a lot with that and with physical distancing, and then providing advice and technical assistance on specific guidance for different sectors. Also, complaint investigation. So members of the public or really anyone can call either 503-846-8390 or go on to our web page. It's an email at EOC-COVID enforcement, all one word, COVID enforcement, all one word, at co.washington.or.us. The phone number and the email address are up on our COVID-19 page. So if you're concerned, you can go there and make a complaint, and we will follow up with that. And then the last thing is the public health group has been really busy working with our community-based organizations. We have contracted and partnered with over 13 nonprofit community-based organizations to help with contact tracing, isolation and quarantine support. And that's resulted in just under $1 million in funding for those local community-based organizations. Okay. Next slide, please. So the last thing that I just wanted to provide an update, because I think we're hearing a lot about it, is what's happening with the schools and the school planning. So the governor and Oregon Health Authority has provided guidance for schools so that they can begin their planning for bringing students back into the classroom. It's going to be a combination of classroom and e-learning as we move into the future. So local public health's role is really advocating for and helping schools receive the training that they need for both individual schools and the school districts, asking the Oregon Department of Education to help them with their assessments, and then local public health would review at the district level those plans. We're also having meetings with our local schools just to understand what their needs are around support and to work with them around how would we review these plans, what's the most efficient way that supports them within our capacity as well. And then I did want to bring up some concerns that we have around some of the school planning. And you might at first wonder, well, why is public health worried about this? And Chair Harrington has become really educated and really understands social determinants of health. And one of the most important social determinants of health is completion of an education. And having access to an education and an equitable education. So we're really concerned about the short-term impacts and parents' ability to return to work. You know, just imagine if your child is doing e-learning 2 or 3 days a week and only physically going into school 1 or 2 days a week. And we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but these are just things that we're thinking about and we're concerned about. And really the concern is the impact is likely to really be on our communities of color and on women who are going to be the ones that, you know, often end up at home taking care of the kids, trying to do a full-time job and be a teacher. We're also really worried about the long-term educational inequities. Kids, the needs of kids vary so much, and the technology and the ability of parents to support their kids when they're working. So we just want that to be on our radars and on your radar to think about even our own workforce. How are we going to support parents who are trying to figure out how they're going to balance the needs of their kids as well as the needs of their families' incomes and just social and psychological needs. It's a lot to juggle. So just to put it on radar, no specific ask. Unfortunately, no answers right now. It's just something we're following. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Rogers, do you have any questions?
I don't think so, but you might mention that today at our meeting, we had meetings for those who are watching all afternoon, that this board did take a position that they will be writing a letter to the governor asking that each of the 3 counties, the counties in the metro area, be looked at separately in terms of their achievements of these goals, so that in essence that we would not be coupled together for all things. So I think that's an important issue in this COVID battle that we're all raging.
Commissioner Willie?
Yes, thank you, Marnie. Great presentation here. We heard earlier today that the age groups that are now most cases are being reflected on as 20 to 30 and 30 to 40. And so I've been asked today, first of all, what are the questions that the contact tracers are asking our newly discovered individuals that have been identified with the COVID, and does it involve? Have they been at a protest in the city of Portland? So I think their emphasis is how much. I mean, obviously, as of tomorrow, we're supposed to be wearing face masks. Obviously, the protesters, about it would appear like half of them are wearing face masks. I mean, how do we monitor that? And then does that have any impact on certainly the new increase in our cases that we're experiencing?
Yeah. So we don't directly ask a question about whether somebody has been at a demonstration or a protest. We do ask questions, leading questions about public exposure, whether they could have been exposed or may have exposed other people at public events. What we are finding is that if you ask too directly sometimes certain questions, that will shut down the interview. And so our staff have been trained in a technique called motivational interviewing, where it really helps folks to recall information as well as their willingness to provide information. So we don't ask that question directly, but we do learn often if people have been at these protests or demonstrations. So that's, yes.
Anything else, Commissioner Willie?
No, sorry, I muted myself. No, I think that's good, Marnie. I think it is concerning, quite frankly, that the age group of affected cases has moved to this social group because they are much more social, and I don't know how we encourage them to wear masks and stay their social distances and do all the things that they need to do. So I guess that'll be a new charge that we have.
Yeah, we're continuing to push that message, and additionally, we've been really talking about protecting people that are at more risk, and those, you know, because you're right, they're the 20-year-olds, the 30-year-olds, they are out and about more. They're more likely to be back at work. They're also more likely to be visiting their friends now that things have opened up. So we are trying to stress that message, and we're trying to stress the message of protecting the older age group and those with medical conditions, but also asking people that are in that older age group or have underlying medical conditions to protect themselves by staying home when they can, wearing their mask when they do need to go out for essential travel.
Okay. Thank you, Marnie. Great report.
Thanks.
I'd just like to say thank you to Marnie and to her staff, all the contact tracers. We're in the long haul now, and it's difficult to do this work day after day, and I just want to express my appreciation. Thank you.
Commissioner Schouten?
I don't have anything more to add. This falls on the heels of a pretty similar, if not quite identical, report that we had heard at our work session earlier today. I commend Marnie Kyle for her good reports, and we all need to wear our masks when we go out into public settings, and as many places as we can possibly wear it where it's feasible. That's one of the things we can all do to slow the spread of this. It's pretty miserable if you get it. I've heard from several people who told me that it was a pretty awful 2 or 3 weeks for them. So none of us will want to get that, and we certainly don't want to give that to other people. And then there's always the specter of death looming over our shoulders as well. So it's tiring, it's fatiguing, it's getting to be very wearisome, but we really need to be tough and stubborn and stick with it and not relax yet.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have a question and then a learning to share. Excuse me, my question goes to schools. So here we are, we're just in the latter part of June, so we still have July and August ahead of us. But for many parents, they may have to adjust their work schedules or just their availability in order to best support their children in whatever construct their schools or their childcare may be providing. Do you know if there is a common goal, at least amongst the school districts in Washington County, for having some clarity from each school district for parents, so that parents know that by some time frame they'll be able to have some level of schedule certainty about what the school year might bring for their children?
I'm not on those calls personally, but based on what I'm hearing from reports from staff, the school districts, the principals, the teachers, everybody understands the importance of really supporting families in education and helping families know what is that future going to look like. They're under a tremendous amount of pressure to get these plans completed, approved, so that they can communicate to parents this is what it's going to look like. But it's some tough planning. It's very different, and we have diverse needs within the schools, and so it's not going to be easy.
Well, I can tell just from our own building how there have been physical adjustments made in order to support client services in the office environment. So, yep, I can appreciate the work. The learning I wanted to highlight and share is just the message of the ability for each of us to be a carrier and to not know that we are a carrier. And so whenever possible, to please wear the masks and practice all of the due diligence that you have been sharing with us over these last, I guess we're going on 4 months now. Yes. So thank you very much to you and everyone on the team who continues to make sure that we are informed, that we as a board can make thoughtful, public health informed decisions, and for the care each and every day for all of those families and the businesses that you're supporting.
Thank you.
Thank you for the great update. Next, we'll move on to boards and commissions. Today, we have appointments for 3 different commissions. The first is to appoint a new member to the Washington County Behavioral Health Advisory Council. The board did have a work session with our staff. We received 19 applications for 12 open positions. 2 members are seeking reappointment, and 7 new individuals applied to the council. What are the wishes of the commission? I can read the motion if you'd like, if that makes it easier.
Move for the recommended action.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to appoint Kim Cooper, Marcia Hilly, John Sheridan, Karen James, Jessica Cardinal, Eric Schmidt, Emily Matkur, Balpreet Singh, and Stephen Youngs as new members, and reappoint Dustin Schulman and Carol Greenhour to the Washington County Behavioral Health Advisory Council for a term ending March 31, 2023. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you, commissioners. Next, we have appoint members to the Developmental Disability Advisory Council. And this action is to reappoint Sean Savage and appoint Ann Madden, Catherine Moran, and Jessica Turner to the Developmental Disabilities Council with terms ending February 28, 2023. This too, we also had a work session on June 2nd. Any questions, comments, or motion?
I move that we appoint the recommended list of candidates to the terms set out in the recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you, commissioners. The next item under boards and commissions is to approve the bylaws and appoint the recommended members to the Washington County Transit Advisory Committee. We discussed this in a council work session. Are there any questions, comments, or a motion?
Move for the recommended action.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Next, we'll move on to public hearings. Tonight, we have 3 different public hearings. The first is to hold the public hearing to increase the previously authorized fiscal year 2019-2020 appropriations for clean water services. And we have our Chief Financial Officer for Clean Water Services, Kathleen Leader, here to take us through a brief staff report.
Good evening, Chair Harrington and members of the board. This is a supplemental budget hearing to increase appropriation authority for the district's 2019-2020 adopted budget. Clean Water Services Chief Executive Officer issued an emergency declaration on March 10th, 2020 in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Oregon local budget law allows via supplemental budget for the expenditure of unappropriated funds in response to a public emergency situation. The district recommends approval of additional appropriation authority of $450,000 in the liability reserve fund to cover unanticipated expenditures necessitated by the district's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, including staff time and equipment transitioning staff to remote working to promote physical distancing, purchasing of personal protective equipment, contracted services to perform deep cleaning and disinfection at facilities, and paid leave for employees meeting requirements under the district's temporary leave policy. And that concludes my staff report. I'm open for any questions.
Are there any commissioner questions on this staff report?
Just a quick comment. I was telling Kathy earlier today that under RS 294-398 is the section, and then she went down and parsed it under 294-481, and all of that's just maybe alphabet soup, but I have never seen in my career that particular use of that application of the statute, and it's very clever. So what you're seeing is a threading of the needle on a very complex issue. So Kathy, I just say good job.
Thank you.
And I'm really glad that we're not facing public emergencies like this all the time, so that we need to take advantage of that ORS, as Commissioner Rogers has noted. But I'm also grateful that all these rules do exist, such that when we need them, such as we do now, we're able to take advantage of them. Thank you, Commissioner, for pointing that out. Are there any other Commissioner questions at this time? Seeing none, I'd like to open a public hearing. Board Clerk, do we have anyone signed up?
Madam Chair, we have none.
All right, so I'll close the public hearing. And are there any comments from the commissioners or a motion to adopt the attached resolution in order to increase authorized appropriations to the previously approved fiscal year 2019-2020 appropriations in accordance with Oregon local budget law?
So moved.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Before
I think we traded there.
We gotcha. I would just like to contribute a comment. I would like to thank the CEO of Clean Water Services, Diane Taniguchi-Dennis, for taking the time and the effort to lead the with the other cities and with the cities and the other service districts to put together a utility assistance program through this COVID public health crisis. It's really additive to our community collaboration that you're doing that work. So thank you to you and your team.
Thank you, Chair.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Our next public hearing is also regarding clean water services, and this is to hold a public hearing, and after that, and considering testimony, approve the attached resolution in order to adopt the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget in the sum of $605,449,500 and make appropriations as detailed in Exhibit A to the resolution and order. And I know we have a staff report, but I do believe we might also have Tony, or will you be saying?
Yes, so we have a small presentation for the audience of our proposed, or actually approved, and hopefully adopted 2020-21 budget for clean water services. And yes, during the public comment period, Tony was going to, our chair for the budget committee, was going to present. So yes,
Great.
thank you.
I wasn't sure if I needed to introduce him now. So please take it away, Kathy
And I'd like
Leader.
to start by turning it over to Diane Taniguchi-Dennis, our Chief Executive Officer, to start our presentation. Next slide.
Thank you, Kathy. I want to thank the Board of Clean Water Services and the Budget Committee for the review. It was a very detailed review of the district's budget on June 6, 2020. So today, for the public, and as part of this public hearing, we're going to provide a high-level summary of what the Budget Committee was able to review with us, and also to acknowledge that Tony Weller, the chair of our Clean Water Services Budget Committee, and also the chair of our Clean Water Services Advisory Committee, will be providing public testimony at the end of the staff report. I'm very deeply appreciative of our board, our regional partners, of our Clean Water Advisory Committee, our cities, and our district team in providing the wisdom that we needed to use to be able to continue to provide essential public infrastructure and environmental services for the protection and enhancement of the Tualatin River watershed and the environment during this very challenging time. I do want to especially acknowledge and thank our district team, who in the midst of this pandemic continued to deliver services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as well as preparing for this budget during this unprecedented time. This team rapidly innovated to provide safeguards for health, all while providing essential wastewater, drainage infrastructure, and watershed operations, as well as meeting our regulatory compliance needs and our business services needs, as well as our laboratories. The team members not only did all of that work, but they sewed their own face coverings to be able to meet their needs. They created their own hand sanitizer and wipes when none could be found for purchase, and they shared this with other organizations so they could meet their needs. They did this so they could keep working at the resource recovery facilities, in the field operations, in the watershed, in the lab, and in the office, as well as remotely, safely, and efficiently. So thank you to the entire team at Clean Water Services. So in order to deliver this very broad mission to create beautiful, clean water for our region, we focus on these 5 strategic outcome areas. So we accomplish more in this region for the watershed by working together to go beyond our organizational boundary of just clean water services so that we can create and sustain strategic partnerships. And we do this through catalyzing of transformative partnerships. We also know that in partnership with others, we are working to create a resilient watershed by optimizing and integrating the management of water resources for the benefit of the public and the environment. And we do this through integrated water resources management and to create resilient watersheds. We also know that doing things better, faster, and more economically by keeping our eye on the bottom line, by focusing on continual improvement and focusing on developing the talent and effectiveness of our employees to deliver on the values for this region, is also critical to achieve organizational excellence. We also know that sound planning, investments, and the stewardship of our regional infrastructure and natural assets is essential to our region's appeal as a place to invest, live, work, and play. So in this way, we contribute to the region's environmental and economic vitality. We also want to deliver practical and pragmatic water solutions for our region and to recover resources, water, energy, and nutrients from once what was known as wastewater, and to optimize our operations through innovation. This past year, Clean Water Services was recognized globally as a leading water utility of the world, and we share our innovations globally so that we can advance innovation and resource recovery for water resources. But we do have some challenges ahead. Next slide, please. There are increasing regulatory requirements that we need to make sure we stay ahead of so we can properly plan for technology investments and programs. Things like aluminum and ammonia and temperature and copper we need to plan for the future. We also need to meet the needs of our growing region through our infrastructure. And we must also take care of our aging infrastructure through asset management. We are really focused on the changing weather patterns, which is causing us to be able to focus on more resilient solutions to deal with more water and at times less water that the weather delivers to us. We're also needing to manage our risk and our vulnerability during economic uncertainty, and certainly COVID really raised this issue for us to be able to manage risks and vulnerability. So in order to meet these challenges ahead, the next slide, we need to focus on resiliency. And so you're going to hear a lot about resiliency in the upcoming months as we implement our strategic plan. And it's resiliency in terms of establishing our workforce, our facilities, our programs and services so that we can deliver on the values that this region is desiring, invest in gray and green infrastructure, and also to invest in the beautiful natural environment of Washington County. Next slide, please. And all of this is based on a strategic business plan to ensure that we have a resilient workforce. And we are continued to develop our commitment to develop our workforce as we transition through the baby boomer retirements that's hitting us right now, and to develop our new leaders for the future, all while maintaining the level of efficiencies that we gained through our business process reengineering back in the late 90s, while we expanded into our watershed-based approach for the environment, and instituting our performance accelerators through our goal share program, business process improvements, and now business process resiliency with a strategic focus. Next slide, please. So we invest in 5 areas for our programs and services. We have our core business services, regulatory affairs, utility operations and services, water resource recovery operations and services, as well as natural systems enhancement and stewardship. Next slide, please. All of this is focused on making our investments in the gray infrastructure and green infrastructure and the natural systems themselves. So we have our capital program that's focused on infrastructure repair and replacement. We're continuing to protect and restore our watershed by investing in restoration projects. We're focused on optimizing our services by working with our partners, continuing to fund for our system expansion as we grow, but also focused on recovering resources of reclaimed water, our biosolids, the creation of fertilizer through our phosphorus recovery, and also energy. Next slide, please. We're doing this on the backdrop of the COVID situation. And the economy, as we begin to reopen and as we begin to be on our road for recovery, we know that we need to plan for the impacts of the financial situation here in the region. So we did have an economic analysis that was performed by Eco Northwest, and it really provided the district a strong compass in which to navigate the potential economic impact of the pandemic that will have on our customers and their ability to pay, and it reverberates to the district's financial resources. But as financial stewards, we have been very practical and pragmatic and proactive in our financial planning, and together we will weather this financial challenge. And we're doing this by adaptively managing and prioritizing our investments, as well as tightening our expenditures, tightening our belts. As a commitment to the regional economy on the road to recovery, we are recommending that we hold the district's rates and charges steady through the end of this calendar year, through December. We would normally increase our rates in July to be able to fund the investments that are needed for the region. But keeping us steady allows us to see the true trajectory that we are on and our ability to reassess our investments. So we have a strategy where we are sequencing capital investments based on need, both for growth that is still potentially hopefully occurring, as well as for the needs to manage the assets. We're sequencing the hiring of our current vacancies and new positions to make sure that we have the revenue to support these positions. And we also have planned reductions in our operating expenditures where we could tighten our belt further. So Kathy is going to talk about with you our financial plan for this next year.
Thank you, Diane. Next slide, please. This graph shows historic and budgeted expenditures, revenues, and related fund balance by year since 2008 for the district. The district's financial plan calls for reasonable and predictable rate increases, which are key to the long-term financial health of the district. They provide for the ability to meet current operations, future debt service payments, and future capital needs. The stacked bars show expenditures by year. The dotted blue line represents revenues and shows incremental growth over time related to planned rate increases and growth from new customer connections. The solid green line represents operating reserves, which have grown over time to help fund future capital projects such as the Tualatin Basin Water Supply Project and to service future debt issuances. Reserves begin to decline, as you can see on this graph, in fiscal year 2019, with the increase in planned capital projects that occurred and a one-time lump sum payment of $15 million in reserves used to reduce the district's pension liability with PERS and stabilize future employer rates. Next slide, please. This graph compares Clean Water Services sanitary sewer and surface water management rates to other utilities in the region. The approved budget is based on an average residential monthly rate of $55.20. And as you can see from the graph, even if we had done the planned rate increase of $57.54, the district's rate would be lower than other utilities and competitive with the region. Next slide, please. As previously noted, the district is recommending utility rate increases planned to begin July 1st be delayed at least until December 31st, 2020. The district will come back to the board in October or November to review the economic indicators and determine if its recovery is underway. This graph shows the impact of deferring rate increases. For this red line, if the district adopted the planned rate increases beginning July 1st as they originally had planned in our financial forecast, the average annual increase for both sanitary sewer and surface water management would be 4.8% going forward to meet future debt and capital needs. Next slide, please. As we introduce this green line, this is showing what will occur with the deferral of these rate increases effective July 1st, 2020, which would result in an average annual increase of 5.5% going forward to meet future capital debt and debt and capital needs. Next slide, please. So this slide is showing us our approved budget for and revenues and related expenditures. For the revenues, the primary ongoing revenues are rate revenues for sewer and surface water management services of $150.2 million, and system development charges assessed on new customer connections of $18 million. The miscellaneous fees that you see on the revenue side of $7.2 million include planned reimbursements from developers on capital projects. On the expenditure side, the primary expenditure includes $82.1 million for operating, $87.7 million for capital projects, $21.7 million for debt service, and $8.1 million for other fund outlays. The other fund outlays include utility bad debt expense, franchise fees, pass-through revenues to member cities, self-insurance claim costs, and capital outlay. We have two additional items that were added into this category this year. One is it includes $500,000 for a potential utility assistance program that we're looking to work through with member cities and other distributors, and $1.5 million has been set aside related to the staff positions, as Diane had talked about earlier, proposed but not included in the departmental budgets this year. These positions will be prioritized and brought to the board for approval based on actual revenue and cash flow. Next slide, please. And that concludes the staff report.
Commissioners, do you have any questions? Hearing none, I'm going to open a public hearing on the adoption of the Clean Water Services fiscal year 2020-2021 budget and making appropriations. Madam Clerk, do we have any sign-ups for testimony?
We do, Madam Chair. We've got both Dale Feek, and then we've also got Tony Weller. So both have 2 minutes, and I'm going to call on Dale first. Dale, I have unmuted you, so you have your 2 minutes.
Mr. Feek, are you there? We don't hear you yet. Hello?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Mr. Feek.
Thank you. Chair Harrington and Commissioners, I'm Dale Feek, Chair of the Washington County Citizens Network and Project Director of Hillsborough Air and Water. I listened to the entire Clean Water Service Budget Committee meeting on June 5th. You, Chair Harrington, said that you learned much and appreciated the presentations. I also learned a lot about the Clean Water Services over $1.5 billion budget proposal. It was not a comment. So I called some of the presenters and Clean Water staff members and asked questions. I learned from Kathy Leader via Bruce Roll that the money that Intel is going to donate to Clean Water Service is not going to be donated directly to Clean Water Institute. I have been concerned because Intel had previously donated $250,000 to Clean Water Institute, a nonprofit organization funded by a loan from Clean Water Services. Clean Water Services writes the industrial wastewater discharge permit for Intel, and a conflict of interest could occur. I was pleased that Baumgartner let me know that Clean Water Services did let Intel know that they were discharging perpolyfluorinated chemicals as the PFAS PFOA substances, even though Intel thought they were not. I'm hoping that Clean Water Service will write local limits for Intel and Hillsborough landfills, since they both had perpolyfluorinated chemicals being released. Once those chemicals get into our water, it is very hard and expensive to remove them. Mr. Baumgartner also let me know that the rules prescribing the discharge of non-domestic water to the public-owned treatment works for Clean Water Services are being rewritten. DEQ and EPA are requiring that to be done. EPA requires that DEQ oversees the industrial discharge permitting, and DEQ has delegated that responsibility to Clean Water Services. I am pleased that Clean Water Services works hard to accomplish this mission, and the staff members have a strong bond with each other, as evidenced by all the people that made presentations during the budget committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feek.
Okay, so next is Tony Weller. And Tony, I have promoted you to a panelist. Did you have a presentation as well?
Let me turn my mic on. Is that better?
There you go.
Statement. That's all. No presentation. Just good evening to the chair and commissioners. It's good to see those who see through the little pictures. But I want to thank you again. I consider it an honor to continue to serve at your pleasure, I guess, on CWAC, and to also have another opportunity to be on the budget committee. And I would echo what Dale said, and what has been said before, is every time we do a budget committee meeting, we get to learn something new. And the diversity and depth of activity and the innovation that Clean Water is involved in is truly unique for a government agency, and it's something I think that the commissioners and the county can be very proud of. As we are adapting to this new COVID normal, I'm hopeful that we get back to something that we recognize as normal, and then as part of this process, maybe we take something away from it that it actually improves what we're used to, and some of it's of technology and Zoom meetings, but it's all to. I would say about the budget, that this year's budget reflects, I think, that balance of the current economic situation and also increasing regulatory. The committee reviewed it. It was unanimously supported and recommended to be forwarded to the board. And I think Kathy gave a presentation. If you have any questions with regards to the budget committee meeting, and most of you were there, I'd be happy to answer it or respond to it.
Thank you, Budget Chair, Mr. Weller. I appreciate your comments tonight, but also your investment of time and energy serving with us on the Budget Committee, leading us through that process, and all of your years of looking into the policy details and the budget details of Clean Water Services. It's a real honor to work with you.
Thank you. it's been great to get to know you better and to work with you as well, and the rest of the commissioners. I really appreciate all the effort, because I know what, from just my brief elected experience, I know how much time that takes, and yours is even more. So thank you very much for your service.
Thank you. Is there anyone else signed up for the public hearing?
That is all we have, Madam Chair.
All right. Well, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. What are the wishes of the commission?
I move that we approve the Clean Water Services budget as proposed for fiscal year 2021.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the resolution and order adopting the fiscal year 2020-21 budget, as Commissioner Scout noted, in the sum total of $605,449,500, and make the appropriations it's detailed in Exhibit A to the resolution and order. I would also, I forgot to make my comment, I'd like to thank you all for setting up the budget review moving forward, so that there are these check-in times as you described. Very disciplined organization, and I really appreciate that. All in favor of the motion, please vote by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you, commissioners. We'll next move on to the public hearing with regard to rates and charges for fiscal year FY 2020-2021 through December 31 of 2020. Staff report.
Thank you, Chair. As discussed during the budget hearing, the district planned a rate increase of 4.2% for sewer and stormwater utilities, along with an increase in the system development charges for sewer and surface water, in line with the engineering news record, which is around 2% right now. Due to the financial stress many families and businesses are feeling from the COVID-19 pandemic, Clean Water Services is recommending the utility rate and fee increases scheduled for implementation July 1st be delayed until economic indicators show recovery is underway. This resolution order proposes no fee increases effective July 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2020. Staff will come back to the board in October or November to review financial indicators and to determine if recovery is underway and if planned rate and fee increases should be implemented. And that concludes the staff report.
Commissioners, any questions?
No, I'd just like to make a comment that how much I appreciate Clean Water Services sensitivity to our existing financial environment, and by holding off on their increased rates and charges. And so I just think that's a reflection of what a great organization they are, and certainly sensitive to the needs of our community and the customers that they serve. So congratulations and thank you for that.
Thank you. So at this point, I'll open a public hearing. Do we have anyone signed up to testify?
Madam Chair, we have none.
Seeing that we have no one in the room nor signed up to testify, I'll close the public hearing. Are there any last commissioner comments or a motion?
I think the only comment I'd like to make is, I just wanted to note that Clean Water Services charges very competitive rates, both for its stormwater and for its sewage service, while at the same time engaging in some of the most advanced treatment anywhere in the world. What we call tertiary treatment has been, I think, an excellent steward of the Tualatin River Basin. It's been really a pleasure, and it's just been a lot of fun to be on the board of directors for this great organization for these last number of years. And so it's, I just wanted to make a note of that, and I look forward to making the necessary approvals for the current no change in rates and charges for at least at the end of this year.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments? Might there be a motion to adopt the resolution in order with administrative provisions and no fee changes effective July 1, 2020 through December 31, 2020?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution as noted. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you, commissioners. Next, we'll move on to the action section of our agenda. We have 5 different action items for this evening, and the first one comes under Health and Human Services, an action to declare an emergency related to COVID-19. Do we have a staff report?
A very brief one, Madam Chair. This is the 6th extension, so you're quite familiar with this process, and there is no expansion of authority sought here, just continuing the existing authority, and the emergency declaration goes until July 21st, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Rapplier. And I hope we'll be able to transition to phase 2 by then, but I just remain hopeful. Are there any questions or comments from the commission? Seeing none, is there a motion to declare an extension of the emergency until July 1, 2020 under Washington County Code Chapter 8.36 to support response activities to COVID-19?
So moved.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you, commissioners. The next action item is from Land Use and Transportation to endorse the letter of commitment to the Metro Council and authorize the county administrator to sign the Memorandum of Understanding for delivery of projects on Tualatin Valley Highway. And we have a staff report.
Good evening. Chris is just going to walk very quickly through the contents of that, just so everybody knows what we're asking you to sign on for. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. So yes, as you said, we're here today to seek your support for a letter of commitment to Metro to deliver multiple projects in Metro's regional transportation funding measures subject to the measure passing in November. And with the passage of this measure, the letter of commitment expresses the county's intent to enter into intergovernmental agreements with Metro with more details about scope, schedule, budget, and details of project oversight and so forth. The commitment includes as well the county responsibility to participate with Metro, ODOT, TriMet to deliver the safety and transit projects on the 16-mile stretch of Tualatin Valley Highway between Beaverton and Forest Grove. And that's we're asking you to authorize the CAO to sign the Memorandum of Understanding to continue for us all to work together, align this corridor to refine the project and get it ready for delivery. I just want to say that this is a milestone. It results, it's a result of much work by Metro and other partner agencies, community leaders, the public, and staff. And as you'll remember, development of all these projects began with identifying desired community values and outcomes, and had much input from a task force made up of elected officials, community leaders, and business leaders, and much more input from other from the public and other comments, and staff from the county, Metro, ODOT, TriMet, and all the cities have worked together to develop these concepts to a level to estimate some cost and feasibility. So the project descriptions as they are now are also attached with the letter of commitment in the MOU. So we seek your support to sign the letter and to enter into the Memorandum of Understanding.
Wonderful, thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions or comments?
I would enthusiastically say let's sign it and send it.
Second.
Great. We have a motion and a second to endorse the letter of commitment and to move forward as previously described. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Measure passes unanimously 5-0. Thank you, commissioners. We'll move on next to the Office of Community Development to approve the Community Development Block Grant, also known as CDBG, intergovernmental agreement amendments with the consortium cities in Washington County. And we have Jenny Proctor, our manager for community development, here joining us for a staff report.
Thank you, Chair Harrington, commissioners. So all three items tonight have to do with the urban county requalification under both of those programs. As way of background, back in 1979, the Community Development Block Grant Program
14th will be an extended work session starting at 8:30. Then on Tuesday, July 21st, we'll have a work session at 8:30 in the morning and a board meeting at 10. And Tuesday, July 28th, we're going to have a work session at 2 in the afternoon and a board meeting in the evening, just like today. We also have a special executive session coming up this Friday, which would be July 26th.
26th.
July 26th at 3:30 in the afternoon.
June.
Actually, it's June.
I did say July. The other meetings I
and Kathy confirmed it. Yeah.
Just trying to speed things along.
Thank you for catching me on that. That wouldn't be proper notice, so I appreciate that. So we'll be having a special executive session this Friday, June 26th, starting at 3:30 in the afternoon. Is there anything else I might have missed or stated incorrectly? Seeing none, are there any other board announcements from commissioners tonight? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
So move.
We have a motion, and I'll take one of those as a second. All those in favor of adjourning, please vote by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously, 5-0. We're hereby adjourned. Thank you, commissioners.
Good night.
Thank you for being in the room, Catherine.
My pleasure. Good night.
Good night.